She is the most frightened and closed-off dog we have ever saved. This is Elodie. She is only a 7-month-old German Shepherd puppy, and from the moment we took her in, we knew something was wrong with her. It was a bright afternoon on the gravel lot outside our rescue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her crate sat in the open trunk of a car that had just done a 2-day drive from northern Canada. Inside, it was silent. Just a dark shape pressed into the back corner, eyes fixed on nothing. The drivers told me she barely moved the entire trip. She never stepped out of the carrier. She didn't go to the bathroom. She hardly touched her food. They had never seen a rescue puppy that quiet, and neither had I. When I opened the crate door, she didn't flinch or try to bolt. Most scared dogs explode outward, looking for a gap. Elodie did the opposite. She stayed folded into herself like she was trying to disappear into the plastic wall. Her eyes slid past me, glassy and distant, as if someone had turned the switch inside her to off. I tried the usual soft voice, the crinkle of a treat bag, the slow sideways angle that tells a scared dog you're not a threat. Nothing. Her breathing stayed quiet. The only sign she was alive was a tremor in one paw when a truck rattled past. The drivers waited for me to say we'd carry her into the kennel wing. I looked at the row of concrete runs and pictured this shut-down puppy dropped into echo and barking. Then I looked back at her crate and realized I was more afraid of losing her mind than her body. So instead of asking them to unload her at the shelter, I asked the driver to follow me home. Some dogs are too broken for a normal rescue, and Elodie felt dangerously close to never coming back from wherever she was hiding inside herself. She didn't step out of the crate when we got home. I carried her, still curled into herself, and set the whole thing down in the quiet corner of my backyard. The yard was quiet, just Wind and my 2 dogs watching from the porch. Raya saw her first. My Doberman Pinscher made a slow circle around the crate, ears forward, reading every angle, not growling, just taking it in. Mira, my lab mix, walked over once, sniffed the air, then folded herself down beside the crate, 3 inches from the plastic wall, and stayed there like a soft brown blanket. With nervous, broken animals, you learn a simple checklist. You leave the crate door open, you don't stare, you talk low and steady, you drop good treats close enough to smell, but not close enough to scare. I sat on the concrete while little pieces of chicken landed in a crooked trail. Mira stayed pressed to the crate, and Elodie did nothing. She didn't step out. She didn't even lean forward to sniff the bowl until I finally went back inside. By evening, I told myself I was just worried about her. That if this German Shepherd puppy couldn't eat, couldn't relax, we might lose her. But somewhere between checking on her for the 10th time and pretending I wasn't checking again, I realized I was afraid for me too. Afraid of falling in love with a dog whose odds were this bad. That night, when the neighborhood finally went quiet, I stepped out one last time. From the porch, I could see the crate in the corner of the yard. Mira was still there, pressed along the side like she was holding the world together with her ribs. As I came closer, I saw her lift one paw and place it gently on the edge of the crate. Inside, Elodie's nose twitched, just once. Barely there, like a tiny spark in a room that had been dark for a very long time. And I remember thinking that if she could still feel another dog's scent, then we had a chance, a small, slow, painful one, but still a chance. I lost her in less than 3 seconds. The next morning, I opened the crate door and stepped back like I always tell people to do. Give the dogs space, let them choose. Elodie didn't hesitate. She shot past me like a shadow. Not toward the house, not toward me, but straight across the yard and into the deepest corner of the bushes. My stomach dropped. That is every foster's nightmare right there. The gate you thought was latched, the dog you just promised to protect disappearing into the world. I called her name once soft, then again, a little sharper. Nothing. The yard went so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I finally pushed into the bushes after her. Branches grabbed at my shirt, scratched my arms, leaves in my face, dirt in my shoes. She had wedged herself so far back into that tangled mess that at first I only saw 2 dull eyes staring out from under a branch. No growl, no bark, no movement. Her whole body was locked, stiff as stone, like this little German Shepherd puppy had decided if she couldn't outrun life, she'd just stop existing in it. I talked to her the whole time I crawled in. Not the pretty words, just the tired ones. "It's okay, kid. I know, I know. When I finally got close enough, I slid one arm under her chest and one under her back legs and lifted. That's when it happened. A warm flood hit my shirt and ran down my front. Fear does that sometimes. Nothing says, I'm comfortable with you, quite like a full bladder on your clean clothes. But she didn't whip her head around, didn't snap, didn't fight. She just froze there in my arms, shaking so hard I could feel her ribs jump against my hands. I carried her inside and set up an old mattress on the floor of the spare room. No kennel walls, no concrete echo, just a soft island big enough for all three dogs if they wanted it. Raya paced the doorway once, checking the perimeter like she always does, and then went to lie down nearby. Mira walked over, circled slowly, and folded herself down right against Elodie's side, like she'd done at the crate. Later that night, I stood in the hallway and watched them through the crack in the door. Three shapes on one mattress, the room lit only by the streetlight outside. Elodie was on her side, breathing slow, body finally still. For a second, I thought she was asleep. Then I saw it. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing, as if even in her dreams she couldn't afford to let go. We started counting progress in inches, not in days. The next morning, I moved her food bowl closer by maybe half a foot and sat on the far side of the room. Elodie stayed glued to the corner of the mattress, eyes on the wall, pretending I wasn't there. Raya walked through once like she owned the place, nails clicking on the hardwood, giving that quick, sideways look only another dog understands. Mira just lay down with a sigh along Elodie's back, ribs rising and falling in slow, steady waves. Every few hours, I made tiny changes, the bowl a little nearer to my feet, my chair a little nearer to the mattress. Sometimes the only victory was that she didn't try to disappear. Sometimes the only thing that moved was her eyes, tracking the path from my hand to the floor and back again. Somewhere in there, I started thinking about the first dog that ever taught me how to breathe. I was a kid, scared of the dark and scared of my own thoughts. We had this little shepherd mix named Ivy. At night, when the house went quiet and my brain turned everything into a disaster, she'd climb up on the bed without asking and press herself against my chest. I'd match my breathing to hers, in and out, until the panic turned into something softer and finally let me sleep. I didn't know it then, but that dog was my first therapist. Now here I was, 55 and sitting on the floor again, trying to be that for a German Shepherd puppy who wasn't sure she wanted to exist in this room at all. I placed a single piece of chicken on the wood, maybe 18 inches from her paws, and then set another one halfway between that and my hand. Then I turned my head away and waited. It took a long time. Long enough for Raya to get bored and wander off, for Mira to shift and push her back a little closer to mine. There was a rustle, the lightest scrape of claws. I didn't look. I just listened. A pause, a breath, another tiny sound. When I finally let myself glance over, the chicken closest to her was gone. Her body was still pressed to the mattress, but her eyes were wider now, watching me, not the wall. The second piece, the one halfway to my hand, stayed on the floor. That was fine. You don't rush a heart that's still deciding if it wants to trust its own beat. That night, I sat on the edge of the mattress sideways, my shoulder toward her, my gaze on the doorway so she didn't feel pinned down. Mira snored softly at my feet. Raya was a dark curve in the hallway. I felt more than heard Elodie shift behind me, a soft exhale close to my elbow. And then there it was. The lightest touch on my arm, a cold nose, there and gone. Her choice, not mine. In that tiny tap of whiskers against skin, I realized I was suddenly, completely terrified again. Because now there was something I could actually lose. I thought we were finally turning a corner when the sound found her. It was late afternoon, the kind where the light in Minneapolis makes every edge look softer. Elodie had started taking a few quiet steps off the mattress, then sliding back to safety if I shifted too fast. She would eat with me in the room now, as long as I stayed on the floor and pretended to be incredibly interested in the pattern on the wall. Raya drifted through like a calm bodyguard. Mira stayed close like a heartbeat. Then the neighbor's renovation crew fired up their equipment. A diesel engine coughed to life on the other side of the fence, low and rough. A metal chain clanged against a trailer hitch, ringing out over the yard. It was such an ordinary sound, I almost didn't notice it. Elodie did. She dropped. 1 second, she was standing there beside the mattress. The next, her legs just folded and she flattened to the floor, claws scraping for half a heartbeat and then going still. Her eyes went empty in an instant. All the light pulled straight out of them. Raya stepped closer, head tilted, but Elodie didn't even blink. Mira nudged her shoulder gently with her nose. No response. It was like someone had reached into the room and unplugged her. I'd seen noise-sensitive dogs before. Fireworks, thunder, gunshots in the distance, you learn the patterns. This felt different. This wasn't startle and recover. This German Shepherd puppy didn't startle at all. She just shut down and stayed there, trapped somewhere I couldn't reach. I caught myself staring at the fence, listening to the engine idle, metal rattling as they loaded something heavy. You don't need to see a yard to imagine it. A chain stretched tight, big vehicles coming and going. A young dog learning that loud meant don't move or it gets worse. I'll never know exactly what happened back there, and honestly, I don't want the details. The outline is enough. For years, I told people dogs live in the moment. New day, new walk, new start. Sitting on that floor, watching Elodie disappear at the sound of that motor, I realized some of them don't. Some of them live on replay. The body is in your house, but the mind is still stuck in that same bad loop, over and over again. The engine finally cut off. The chain went quiet. The workers left. The house settled back into its usual noise, fridge humming, traffic in the distance, Mira's slow breathing. Elodie stayed on the floor like a fallen statue, eyes not quite focusing on anything. I lay down beside the mattress, not touching her, just matching my breath to her to hers, the way Ivy once taught me to breathe in the dark. After a while, Mira got up, padded out of the room, and came back with an old stuffed duck she loves. The thing has no stuffing left and one wing, but it still squeaks if you hit the right spot. She set it down next to Elodie's paws and backed off, head low, waiting. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the duck rolled half an inch as Elodie's toes flexed. Her tail, pressed flat against the blanket, gave the smallest twitch, barely there. It wasn't much, but watching that tiny movement, I felt something in my own chest move too. Because if her tail could still answer a toy and another dog's kindness, then maybe her heart could answer the world again someday. The first time I clipped a leash to her collar, she folded in half. It was a quiet morning, pale sun on the grass, Raya already dancing at the gate, because walk is her favorite word. Mira waited with that patient lab mix face, tail tapping, like she knew this was not a normal outing. I knelt by the mattress, slipped the harness over Elodie's head, and felt her whole body go heavy under my hands. We made it to the back door in slow motion. Raya trotted ahead, checking for monsters that did not exist. Mira hovered a step behind Elodie, bumping her shoulder every few feet like a friend in a crowded room. Elodie moved like a puppet whose strings were tangled, one reluctant step, then another, eyes wide, ears pinned back. At the open gate, she saw the world beyond the fence and just flattened. Front legs shot out, back legs stuck, belly almost scraping the concrete. That 7-month-old German Shepherd puppy turned into a living doormat and refused to budge. I could feel the leash pulsing with her trembling. I could have dragged her. People do sometimes when they're late or tired or embarrassed. Instead, I sat down on the driveway beside her, an old guy on the ground with 2 dogs behind him and one glued to the pavement. Raya turned back and stared at me like she was asking, "Is this really the plan?" Yeah, that was the plan. Eventually, panic loosened its grip enough for us to reach the sidewalk. The street was quiet, just a couple of parked cars and a bicycle in the distance. Raya led, Mira took the flank, and Elodie walked between them like a fragile little satellite held in orbit by gravity she didn't understand. Her head stayed low, but her feet moved. That alone felt like a miracle. We had maybe 30 seconds of peace. Then the garbage truck turned the corner. Same low diesel rumble. Same metal clank of chains and bins knocking together. I felt Elodie hear it before I did. She tried to disappear into the pavement. Her legs went out, claws scraping for grip, body trying to dig into the sidewalk as if she could tunnel back to wherever she used to hide. Her eyes went hard and far away. Raya stiffened, putting herself between the truck and our little cluster. Mira leaned into Elodie's side, but it was like leaning into a statue. I didn't pull, didn't cheerlead. I just lowered myself down again, right there on the curb, next to this shaking dog who wanted to stop existing. Cars rolled past, people walked by, some of them staring, some pretending not to. You can feel those looks even when you don't meet anybody's eyes. 55 years old, sitting on cold concrete, talking softly to a dog who refused to stand. I chose her over my pride and stayed. The truck rumbled away. The street exhaled. It took a long time for her to come back from wherever that sound had sent her. First, her ears twitched, then her eyes started seeing instead of just staring. When she finally lifted her head, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We didn't turn around. We shuffled on. One slow block, then another, until we reached the tiny park a few streets over. Raya trotted ahead to mark a favorite tree. Mira followed, nose down, tail relaxed. Elodie stopped at the edge of the grass and froze again, but this time it wasn't terror, just uncertainty. I stood still and let the leash hang loose. She sniffed the air, took one step forward, then another, then a third, right up to the spot where Mira had just been. She lowered her head and carefully, almost shyly, smelled the base of that tree. 3 steps. That's all it was. But for the first time, I let myself wonder if one day she might take steps like that toward a stranger's open hand. We started sharing her in pieces, the way we shared all our dogs. Short videos of a German Shepherd puppy watching the world from a doorway. A shaky photo of her lying between Raya and Mira on the mattress. A 30-second clip of her taking those 3 careful steps to sniff a tree. People didn't see her whole story yet. They just saw the eyes. Those eyes pulled more comments than any happy wagging dog we posted that month. One afternoon, a man messaged the rescue page and asked if he could meet her. His name was Nolan. He said he worked as an art teacher who used drawing as a kind of therapy with kids that didn't have the words for what was going on in their heads. He didn't promise miracles. He didn't write long speeches. He just said he understood slow work, and he wondered if Elodie might let him sit in the same room as her for a bit. When he showed up, Raya loved him immediately. Of course, she loves everyone. Mira walked over, took one sniff, and leaned her whole weight against his leg like she was stamping him acceptable. Elodie stayed where she felt safest these days, half behind the frame of the living room doorway, body long and tight, head poked out just far enough to see. Nolan did something I wish more people did. He didn't walk toward her. He didn't crouch down and clap his hands or call her name in a high voice. He just sat on the floor in the middle of the room, crossed his legs, and pulled a sketchbook out of his bag. Then he started drawing Raya. Raya posed like a professional, chest out, ears up, tail slow and pleased. Mira eventually flopped right next to him, her big head almost in his lap, while he switched to a new page and traced the curve of her back. He talked more to them than to me, in that low, absent-minded tone people use when they're focused on a line. He never once turned his whole body toward the scared German Shepherd puppy in the doorway. Elodie watched. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her toes dug into the rug, ready to launch backward if anything felt wrong. But her eyes were different now. Not empty. Curious in tiny flashes, then guarded again. Every time Nolan's pencil scratched across the paper, her ears twitched. They stayed like that for almost an hour. 2 content dogs, 1 man on the floor with charcoal on his fingers, and 1 haunted puppy at the edge of the frame, trying to decide if this scene was safe. When it was finally time for him to go, Nolan closed his book, slid the pencils back into their tin, and stood up slowly. That's when it happened. One of the pencils slipped from his hand and rolled across the hardwood, bouncing to a stop a few feet from Elodie. She stared at it for a long second. Then she did something she hadn't done with any stranger yet. She took a step forward, then another. She lowered her head and sniffed the pencil, then the toe of Nolan's boot, and she did not jump away. Nolan froze, letting her do all the work. He didn't reach out, he didn't speak, he just let her nose decide. When she finally backed up into her doorway again, he let out a breath and glanced over at me. "If she ever chooses me again," he said quietly, "I'll be ready." Up until then, my biggest fear was that no one would ever want this broken dog. Watching her stand there, caught between the safety of my hallway and the smell of a new person she hadn't panicked around, I felt a different kind of fear take over. The fear that someone might want her before she was ready to belong to anyone at all. The night the sky broke open, she disappeared. By then, Nolan had been coming over a couple of times a week. Short visits at first, just him and a sketchbook and two very willing models named Raya and Mira. Then we added little walks to the routine, the four of us moving at whatever speed one scared German Shepherd puppy could handle. He never rushed her. If she froze, he stopped. If she needed to watch from 10 feet back, he stayed at 9. That evening started normal enough. The air in Minneapolis felt heavy, the way it does when a storm is hanging just out of sight. We'd come back from a slow loop around the block, Nolan talking more to the dogs than to me, Raya trotting proud, Mira soft at his side, Elodie glued between them and me like a shadow that hadn't decided which body it belonged to. The first crack of thunder hit like someone dropping a couch upstairs. A second later, the wind slammed into the side of the house. Rain came in hard sheets against the windows. Lightning flashed, close enough that the room went white for a heartbeat. Raya went into patrol mode immediately. She paced the hallway, nails sharp on the floor, checking each window like she could stare the storm down. Mira headed straight for the bathroom like she already knew where the center of the house was. By the time I realized Elodie wasn't at my heel, she was gone. I found her in that bathroom, not in the tub or under the sink like most dogs. She had wedged herself in the narrow space between the washing machine and the wall, pressed so tight I could barely see more than her eyes and the edge of her nose. Her chest moved quick, shallow, like the air in there was running out. Mira squeezed herself in as far as she could, curved along Elodie's side, their ribs almost touching. She didn't lick or whine. She just lay there and breathed. Raya parked herself in the doorway, facing out like she was guarding all of us from the sky. I ended up on the floor in the hallway with my back against the bathroom door jamb. Thunder rolled through my chest, and my own hands were shaking a little. I'd been through one bad storm in my life that ended with sirens and twisted metal on the highway, and you don't forget the way that kind of night smells. The house was different now, but my body hadn't gotten the memo. Sitting there with my knees up and 3 dogs hiding and guarding and breathing behind me, it hit me how similar we all were. A grown man of 55, a confident Doberman, a gentle lab mix, and one terrified puppy, all driven by the same thing, the fear of losing control, of watching the world tip without being able to stop it. The power flickered once and then steadied. Eventually, the thunder softened, the lightning moved farther away, and the rain turned from pounding to steady. The dog's breathing synced up into something calmer. My own heartbeat finally slowed down enough that I could hear my phone buzz in my pocket. It was a message from Nolan. He'd barely pulled out of the neighborhood before the storm hit. He asked if we were okay, then wrote that he still wanted to try fostering her with the intent to adopt, but only if I felt she was at least 10% ready for that kind of change. Reading that, sitting on the floor outside a bathroom full of borrowed courage and old fear, I realized the problem wasn't whether Elodie was ready. The problem was I was the one who wasn't ready to let her go. I said yes anyway. A week later, it was moving day. Not a full move, just the first drive to Nolan's place to see if Elodie could handle breathing in a different house. We did everything by the book. Her crate went in the back of my SUV, same old blanket from my spare room laid inside so it smelled like us. I called it her safe cave out loud, mostly for my own benefit. Raya's leash was clipped to the anchor point in the back, Mira's to the side ring, everyone tied in, everyone secure. Elodie walked to the car slower than usual, but she walked. She climbed into the crate on her own, turned once, and curled up facing the door. For a 7-month-old German Shepherd puppy who used to melt into the floor at the sight of the gate, that alone felt like a parade-worthy achievement. I shut the hatch gently, double-checked the locks, and exhaled. Then, a diesel pickup fired up across the street. Metal clanged against a trailer hitch, chains rattling like someone shaking a box of wrenches. The sound hit the air and cut straight through her. I heard the crate slam from inside the car. By the time I got the hatch open, she was already halfway out, having shoved her body through the gap I'd left to latch the door. Her eyes were gone again, glassy and far away. She twisted, hit the end of her leash, and nearly slipped the harness as she launched herself toward the road. Raya exploded after her, yanking her own clip so hard the car rocked. The leash snapped free from the anchor, and she shot forward like a dark arrow. Mira's leash went tight in my hand, nearly pulling me off my feet as she tried to follow. For a second, it looked like every nightmare at once. Elodie in the middle of the lane, frozen, legs locked, ears flat, headlights rounding the corner, too bright, too close. The low growl of that truck engine rolling over all of us. Raya hit the pavement in front of her and swung wide, barking straight at the grill, not at Elodie. The driver slammed the brakes, tires squealing just enough to raise the hair on my arms. Mira dug in and kept me upright, giving me the anchor I needed to reach forward and grab Elodie around the chest. She didn't fight, didn't run. She just hung in my arms like she had under those bushes, trembling so hard my teeth hurt. I carried her back to the car while Raya paced circles and Mira panted at my knee, 3 hearts hammering for 3 different reasons. That night, after everyone finally fell asleep in a pile on the living room floor, I sat there in the dark, watching her breathe. And for the first time, the words I'd been avoiding slipped out of my mouth in a whisper I hated myself for. Maybe she's not adoptable. Nolan didn't disappear after the street. He showed up the next day with coffee in one hand and that beat-up sketchbook in the other, sat at my kitchen table and listened while Raya paced and Mira sighed, and Elodie watched us from the doorway like always. I told him about the near miss, about the truck, about the way she turned to stone in the middle of the road. I told him what I'd said in the dark. Maybe she's not adoptable. He let the words sit there for a while. Then he shook his head once and said, very quietly, or maybe she just doesn't fit into the kind of home we usually try to shove dogs into. That's when he laid it out. Not the usual story where a broken German Shepherd puppy leaves foster care and magically becomes a normal family dog in a single car ride. His idea was messier. He wanted to make her life bigger, not smaller. Officially, he'd adopt her. On paper, she'd be his. But for as long as she needed, she'd live between us. A few days at my house, a few days at his apartment. Back and forth in the car until her brain learned that a ride didn't always end in terror, that it could mean moving between 2 safe points instead of between bad and worse. Everything in me pushed back. Dogs need one home, one person, one routine. I could already hear the comments in my head from people who like clear lines and simple endings. She'll get confused. You're going to ruin her. This isn't how it's supposed to be. I told him it was too complicated. Told him we'd never done it that way. He just nodded, like he'd expected that answer, and went out to the yard to draw while Raya tried to climb in his lap and Mira tried to share his shade. Elodie stayed inside, watching from the window, her eyes following the way he moved his hands, more than the way he moved his feet. A few nights later, I came home from a late rescue call that didn't end the way I wanted. No details, just sometimes you get there too late. The house was dark and quiet, dogs already inside. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat down on the kitchen floor before I made it to a chair. For once, I was the one who wanted to disappear alone, who wanted to disappear into the wall. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the adrenaline to drain and the guilt to catch up. Long enough for my hands to start shaking the way hers used to. I felt her before I saw her. Soft steps on tile, a pause a few feet away, the air changing. Elodie should have vanished at the first crack in my voice, but she didn't. She walked right up to me, slowly, and then did something I had never seen her do with anyone. She climbed in close, pressed her chest against mine, and laid her head right in the middle of my sternum. No trembling, no flinch, just steady weight and warm breath, pinning me to the moment the way Ivy once did when I was a scared kid in the dark. I wrapped my arms around her without thinking and breathed with her until my hands stopped shaking. It hit me then that she wasn't just the most broken dog we'd ever taken in. She was the one who understood broken better than any of us. That was the night I finally knew where she belonged. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Our happy ending never looked like a movie. Months didn't fly by. They shuffled past in small, careful steps, the same way Elodie moved when she wasn't sure where the floor ended. Somewhere along the way, driving between my house and Nolan's stopped being a crisis and started being a routine. She learned the route in her own way. At my place, she'd hop into the crate in the back of the SUV on her own, turn around once, then lie down so her shoulder brushed that old blanket that still smelled like my spare room and Mira's fur. At Nolan's, she'd step out slower, but with her head a little higher, scanning the parking lot, choosing to move instead of freezing. The car became a bridge, not a tunnel. Nolan's apartment was calm in a way my house never quite managed. Same quiet hallway, same soft light in the living room, same low music he played when he drew. Elodie had a bed set up in the far corner, back to the wall, clear view of the door. She'd curl up there during his sessions, a silent observer while he worked with kids and adults who carried their own invisible storms. Most days, she'd just lay there, eyes half closed, breathing slow. Then one afternoon, a kid walked in who wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. He paced the room, hands twisting in his sleeves, heartbeat loud enough you could almost hear it. Eventually, he drifted toward her corner, sat down on the floor a few feet away, and stared at the same spot on the wall Elodie liked to study. She didn't move, didn't lick his face, didn't crawl into his lap. She just kept breathing, steady and quiet. After a while, his shoulders dropped half an inch. Their breaths fell into the same rhythm. No one said it out loud, but everyone in that room knew something important had just happened between one boy and one broken dog who understood what it meant to be scared of your own world. Back at my place, she lived a different kind of life. In the yard, she ran full speed with Raya, legs finally stretching, ears bouncing, a flash of shepherd fur and Doberman muscle racing the wind. She played clumsy games with Mira, trading that sad, chewed-up duck back and forth until they both collapsed in the grass. When a hammer hit metal next door or a car backfired on the street, she still bolted for the house, heart in her throat. But now she came back out again when it passed. We didn't erase her ghosts. We just gave her enough good days that the bad ones didn't win. One evening, a few months into this two-home experiment, I drove over to Nolan's after work. The building looked the same, but my chest felt different, lighter, and heavier at the same time. I opened his front door and barely got 1 foot inside before I heard nails skitter on hardwood. Elodie rounded the corner at a trot, not a crawl. Her tail was up, the wag still a little uncertain, like she was afraid of wanting too much, but it was real. She came straight to me, nose working overtime, checking my boots, my jeans, the cuff of my sleeve, gathering all the information she needed to file me back under mine. Then, just as quickly, she turned and padded back across the room to where Nolan was sitting on the couch. She settled down at his feet, pressing her side against his leg, looking back at me like she was making sure I understood. This wasn't choosing one of us over the other. This was her choosing both. That was when it really sank in. Our happy ending wasn't that she became a simple dog. It was that 2 homes, 2 humans, and 2 other dogs had quietly reshaped their worlds around one complicated German Shepherd puppy. Years ago, I would have looked at a dog like Elodie and said she was too much. Now I knew the truth. I'd been too stubborn to admit. She wasn't a problem to solve. She was a gift we were lucky enough not to miss. If you're still here, still looking at Elodie, I want you to know something. Dogs like her don't come with a simple before and after. They come in 1,000 tiny moments, stacked one on another, until one day you look up and realize the most frightened dog you ever brought home is finally sleeping without watching the door. Elodie lives between 2 worlds now, and both of them are safe. She knows her corner at my house. She knows the sound of Raya's bark and the way Mira's tail thumps when they all crowd the back door. She knows the routine at Nolan's apartment too, the quiet mornings, the rustle of sketchbooks, the soft shuffle of kids and adults who don't quite know what to do with their own fear. When Nolan first adopted her, he sent updates like clockwork. Photos of her walking beside him on the river path. Little videos of her practicing sits and downs in the kitchens, clumsy and serious, that big shepherd head tilted like she was trying to read his mind. Some nights he'd send a picture of her curled up by his feet while he drew, with a message that just said, "She stayed, the whole storm. We miss her here." Of course we do. There are mornings when I still expect to see that 7-month-old German Shepherd puppy in my doorway, pretending not to watch me make coffee. But missing her and being grateful for her new life are the same feeling now. You can hold both. When people talk about rescue, they like the quick, happy endings, the neat arcs, the dog who arrives broken and leaves perfect in 20 minutes of video. But the ones who need us the most are dogs like Elodie. Slow dogs, quiet dogs, dogs who don't smile for the camera on day 1 or day 10 or even day 50. They're not content. They're a commitment. If more people could see her, really see her, it might change who they're willing to open their homes to. Every view of her story is one more chance that another invisible dog won't be passed over because they hid in the back of the kennel. Every share is one more nudge towards supporting rescues that say yes to the hard cases, the inconvenient dogs, the ones who don't make easy fundraising posters. So if you have a second, tell Nolan thank you down in the comments. Thank him for letting a dog like Elodie take up space in his life. Thank him for agreeing to a strange 2-home plan that made her world bigger instead of smaller. He won't say it himself, but he's the kind of person who quietly stays when things get messy, and dogs like this don't heal without people like that. Right now, as I'm talking to you, she's asleep on a rug in Nolan's living room, not in a crate, not jammed behind a washing machine. She's stretched out between the front door and the hallway where his bedroom is, right in the middle, like a living line connecting our two worlds. If I knock and step in, she'll lift her head, blink slow, and that unsure little tail will start to move. Then she'll get up, check my boots, and wander back to lie down beside him, exactly where she belongs. I used to look at dogs like Elodie and think, too complicated, too much work. Now I know better. She isn't the hardest dog we ever rescued. She's the clearest reminder that broken doesn't mean hopeless, and slow doesn't mean impossible. She's a gift we could have missed if we'd rushed her or given up when it got scary. Thank you for sitting with us through her story. Thank you for feeling this with us. If it moved you, please like, comment, and share it forward. Somewhere out there is another dog lying silent in the back of a crate, and the more people understand dogs like Elodie, the more chances that dog will get. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.